Thought I lost you. Can't lose you, man. After last week, geez, I remain humbled after that. That was quite an exchange we had, I thought, and a lot of comments too afterward. Yeah, and seemed like everybody was taking my side because they kept saying the young man is correct on this one. So I felt bad for you. But someday you'll make a point that'll resonate with the masses.
Yeah.
Don't worry. No, no, there were a lot of comments, and it was actually sort of hard to tell who they were talking about sometimes, but there was a sort of a split, it seemed like, a good debate about it, about suicide, which is what we talked about, and about Aaron Bushnell in particular, and the meaning of it. And I thought it was, it reminded me of a lot of moments on Unregistered, where I sort of like find myself co-creating new analyses on the fly with my guest, where we kind of together will come up with some brand new idea that had never been thought of before. I thought that felt like that. It was really an amazing thing for me. So I just wanted to tell you that. And I almost, and of course my narcissistic self almost just like blew right by you. I was like, and Michael, anything else? Okay. And about Gaza. And you're like, no, but wait, can I just, and then when you finally did, I was like, oh shit. I stand humbled, and it made me rethink every single piece of my previous thinking on it, on the issue. Yeah, but it's a relationship to Christianity and morality, and goodness, phenomenal. Yeah, I still don't know what I think, but it certainly made me think, and that's what as I like to say in the intro to Unregistered, that's what I'm mostly interested in.
Yeah,
is people who make me think. So thanks, man.
Thanks. Have you ever been interested in nihilism?
I mean, I guess some people sort of think I'm a nihilist, but I'm not, and I mean that both philosophically. I'm not philosophically a nihilist, I guess, and I'm certainly not in the way that I live. But when we talk about it, it's a sort of a maybe or maybe not interesting topic. Why?
Yeah, I watched this art house. Well, I shouldn't say that. This film from 1967. It's an adaptation of a play, Marat Sade, the Peter Brooks film. Yeah, and the whole thing is a debate between the Marquis de Sade, and it takes place in a medical institution, like an insane asylum. And it's a debate between Marquis de Sade and a fictionalized Marat. And there's a play within a play going on, but it's a debate between revolutionary liberalism, destruction. We must tear down everything so we can rebuild anew in the names of our new ideals. And the Marquis de Sade, who says, let's just tear it down because it's fun to tear shit down. And
well, is that true though? Like, have I read de Sade? I don't think I have, but I've heard quite a bit about him. Or I heard once upon a time some interesting take on him, which was that, and again, I don't know because I haven't checked the text, but the take was that he was not only was sort of opposed to the establishment and bourgeois norms and tearing it all down, but that he was also had a positive ideology that basically we would sort of call like sexual liberation now.
Yeah.
Right? Did he not? Didn't he sort of celebrate pleasure too? Wasn't that his thing?
I'm
not just sadistic pleasure either. Apparently that's like been falsely tagged on him, that he was just about sadism. It was just about sexual pleasure in general.
I'm not too familiar with his works directly, but the vibe I got from it was like a Nietzschean, Max Stirner egoist kind of thing going on, where it's
so the Max Stirner, the egoist, the guy who sort of invented what's called egoism, which is like the sub category of moral philosophy, I guess. It's like a radical individualism. It's sort of a subset of radical individualism, and it's probably the one coherent, articulated philosophy that I have seen, that I've encountered, that I can say I vibe with. It describes my essence, I think. Just the essence, not my whole analysis of everything, but just sort of like what I'm fundamentally about. But Stirner was neither was he. He wasn't a nihilist either. I mean, again, we need to define it, but I mean, to me, it's an absence of, as I said, a positive ideology or a positive philosophy of life. Nietzsche is also accused of being a nihilist, and that's another philosopher who, very close to my thing. So Nietzsche, Stirner, Foucault are kind of, if you had to pick three, those are probably it. And Richard Pryor, those four, and Clyde Stubblefield, because you have to have a beat with this, or else we'll all go crazy. Those are my philosophers. You have to laugh and have a beat, or else you'll go crazy. Just talking about continental philosophy. But yeah, so Stirner embraced, we teach this course at the Academy on Stirner, on anarchism, the course on anarchism, if anyone is interested in. We do a whole day, a whole session on Stirner. Great session. I love that. We read him directly, and I think a lot of people who consider themselves to be individualists will find a fellow spirit in Max Stirner. So I recommend that. But no, he embraces, as does Nietzsche, life, pleasure, adventure, risk. A lot of masculine virtues, Nietzsche does especially, but Stirner's not just not just negative. That to me is what punk rock was. To me, punk rock actually really did sort of represent most clearly what nihilism is. Punk rock, for the most part, is simply anti-establishment. Just whatever the norms are of the time, we're against it, and we will do whatever we can to violate and mock them and trash them. But they're not offering anything positive. They have nothing good to say about anything. You know, when punk rock started in the 1970s, all the rebels, all the white boy rebels and girl rebels, revolutionaries loved it and thought this is radical. And I'm like, all they're doing is expressing tremendous fury and rage, which, okay, I get part of that, of course. But like right next door at the very same time, they were making R&B music about love and sex. And back then it was all about relationships, actually, about love and sex. And it was love too. I mean, if you look at 70s R&B, it's very romantic. Huge ongoing celebration of life in that music. But like, that's the stuff that's not. Yeah. So anyway, so left-wingers love punk rock. And if you listen to, libertarians do too, interestingly. If you listen to a left-wing podcast, you're very likely to hear a hardcore punk rock intro music with it.
Oh yeah. You're bound to hear hardcore, especially. Yeah.
Hardcore. Yeah, like super hardcore, like the unlistenable shit, the stuff that sounds like a factory. Because that's the most radical music, and which means it's the best. Right.
Yeah, but I guess in regards to Bushnell, well, I guess you saw the utility in his act of violence, right? You saw.
Oh, we're revisiting this?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's sort of why I brought nihilism.
Start some more shit. You want to talk more about suicide? Great, awesome. Kids love that. I was trying to talk about, Barry White up in here, but you had to take it back to somebody killing themselves in front of the Israeli embassy. That's not sexy whatsoever. Yeah. I mean, no, we had very complex arguments on both sides, I thought. But for me, there was tremendous utility in it. I do think it advanced the movement, honestly, for peace. I think it did sort of get the ceasefire date, whenever that is, closer to us to some extent. I mean, you could see it accelerated the movement. People were up in arms about it. There's posters of him all over the Middle East. There's, he became a sort of a symbol, unfortunately, for the movement, but it kind of galvanized the movement even further. So there's that. But then, yes, my point was sort of I guess it is an egoist argument. Yeah, that he was doing what he wanted to do. Very rational calculation, clearly. Serving his own self-interest in being selfless, but then he made a very good argument that he was not being selfless, that he was harming people in his life, assuming he had people in his life. And I'm sure assuming they would not wanted him to have done this. He's depriving them of his presence, but then, so, I mean, it's But then to me, the more interesting question is who's the good Christian here? Is it Bushnell? Is that the ultimate Christian act? Is he being Jesus? Did he have a Jesus complex? In fact, the ultimate martyr for a cause, for a people, for the poor, for the suffering. Mm-hmm. Pretty similar, right? I mean, but then you made a great argument that it's not.
Well, that's what Chris Hedges was arguing too.
Oh, did he? Of course, yeah.
Aaron Bushnell's divine violence or divine, I think it was divine violence he called it, and gave sort of a Christian argument for it. But
people often ask me about Chris Hedges, and they assume that I like him and agree with him. Of course, I agree with him on American foreign policy and on Israel. But wow, the way he gets to those positions and what he has to say about it in particular, it comes straight out of the Bible. He's a Christian socialist. He'll tell you this. But he really is a good Christian in that way. And he's very, very puritanical. He comes from, I think, Connecticut. He's literally a New England Yankee Puritan. I mean, by descent, I believe. And the thing is, like, Chris Hedges never had the 20th century affect him culturally. In that, he's still a Victorian. It's amazing. So if you're interested in Chris Hedges, what he thinks about, to me, people, what he thinks about people, about life, go Google Chris Hedges and porn, and you'll find lengthy writing by him on the subject of porn. In fact, Chris Hedges, I believe he went to the, what's it called? The AVN Awards in Las Vegas one year, the porn awards, and then wrote a whole big article about it in one of the lefty magazines, I think Mother Jones or The Nation or some one of those. And it's, porn is the degradation of women and should be banned. I mean, it's tremendous. I mean, he's the ultimate left-wing Puritan. He sort of like proves my long-standing argument that the left is descended from Christian evangelicals. The whole ideology is. And that he's, and are sexually puritanical and always have been, which is why the whole groomer hysteria thing from the right was always so stupid. And my good friend Jack Mason has pointed this out many, many times too. It's like the right wing are such idiots. No, the left, they're the Puritans. They're the ones who are interested in censoring sex in particular, and always have been. But anyway, I digress. Mm-hmm. Chris Hedges, he's great on Palestine, I suppose. Although, I think it's because he sees the Palestinians as victims, pure victims, and he's the savior. But anyway, sorry, that was a digression.
Well, I guess the big Aaron Bushnell, that story was the culmination of my fear of. Well, it was a good articulation of the spiritual leftist, something Jack Mason talks about a lot, where it doesn't matter about your particular politics, but if you care about some faraway country more than you care about your family, you're a spiritual leftist. If you delight in others' misfortunes, like a big one was when Alec Baldwin got put into jail for a very long time for the accident on set. A lot of Republicans were celebrating that, but you're just being a loser. You're being a spiritual leftist, and this is where it ends up.
Yeah, I was losing my train of. I was thinking about so many things as you were speaking, but yeah. Well, I mean, there's just a misunderstanding of the left there. I mean, and that's actually what we were I think we explored that more deeply than anyone else has. Last week. Like what left-wing psychology really is, and as someone who comes from that and possessed it. I possessed that psychology until my mid to late 30s. And I've always been around those people. I know it, but yeah, you and I defined it. I thought it's a narcissist. It's what we call it, narcissistic performative self-sacrifice.
Oh yeah.
Right. That it looks like you're Jesus giving your body to the cause, giving your life and your body and your soul to the cause of helping other people, the poor in particular, the impoverished, the exploited, the oppressed. but it's all very performative, always, as was, sorry to say it, but Aaron Bushnell was obviously super performative, and acts like that always are. Left-wing political acts are always very performative. They're very much about theater. That's one of the things that they're very different from conservatives and right-wingers in general, until the rise of Milo Yiannopoulos. Like, the right had no idea how to put on a show. The left dominated that stuff. So it's always performative, and ultimately it's serving, of course, their own self-aggrandizement, which is why it's narcissistic. It makes themselves, no one elected them. No Palestinian elected Aaron Bushnell to be their savior. You're electing yourself to be the savior of another people, which, may be a people in need of saving, like, the children in Gaza right now. Okay, sure. This is the rare instance when there actually is an identifiable group of people on Earth who really do need to be saved by people outside. But, in general, even then, it's still, you're electing yourself. So it's narcissistic, it's performative, and it looks like self-sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. This has been a criticism that liberals have been making of the left. Liberals who still support the Democrats, liberals who see all the aid that the Democrats are giving to Gaza as productive. They're basically saying Anthony Blinken has visited Israel several times. He's working as hard as he possibly can for a ceasefire. The truth of the matter is, you protesters are being all performative. You are being counterproductive. Trump is going to get reelected because of your abandonment of the Democratic Party over your stupid principles. Adults are in the room right now working as hard as they possibly can for an actual resolution to this.
Yeah, did you see AOC getting accosted at the movies by
someone?
Yeah,
I got that clip, yeah.
And she was pissed. Mm-hmm. And now I have to say, what I heard from the protester there was, why are you not calling it genocide? And that's all I heard. Because I think, AOC has voted for Israel in the past, so she deserves
voted for the Iron Dome.
I know that, yeah. But since then, I don't know. I'm not sure how she's voted recently. I think she's voted decently well. But anyway, she has a history. Doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of a dumb thing to hammer her on. But anyway, she got pissed at one point and said, you're not helping those people.
Yeah.
Turned to her and turned to the protester and said, you're not helping those people by doing this. And that's the refrain. I've heard Nancy Pelosi talk about the people in front of her house, which I've been giving the address out to in San Francisco. I think there's a 24/7 like vigil. People surround Nancy Pelosi's house in Pacific Heights here in San Francisco round the clock, I believe. And she's pissed about it. She talks about it all the time. She's basically stays in Washington. I don't think she's come back here since October. Also, her husband, has a tendency to get into weird fights with half-naked men. But anyway, with hammers. What was the dispensation of that? I think dude went to prison. I think he's doing like a couple of years for that, by the way. Remember that that's a huge story, and it just like faded.
I think he got a suspiciously light sentence too for attacking Paul Pelosi. Yeah. I
mean, can you believe we spent that much time talking about that? Like, that was we were really like I mean, not when I say we, I mean the whole media. Like, was everybody, and even the alt media was totally into that, especially the alt media.
Yeah.
And now I think like I wouldn't spend a second on that if that happened today. Just a lot of stuff that the whole COVID thing seems so trivial to, not entirely, but a lot of it seems so trivial now. I'm so glad we're done with that. And it's interesting. One of the effects of Ukraine and now Gaza, especially, is you see what I call the COVID coalition breaking apart. COVID, you saw the emergence of this really weird political coalition that I'd never seen before, right? So you had like these Trumpists were kind of the leaders of it. And then you had all these sort of disaffected liberals and disaffected sort of newly red-pilled liberals. And then some like hardcore lefties also. The ones who were opposed to the mandates and the lockdowns and the masks, those people, which a weird coalition came together. And then you also had and this was the problem, you had this huge influx of newly political people, which we've never seen. Like in my lifetime, I've never seen that many newly political people. COVID politicized and radicalized a lot of people. The problem was it always felt very like hollow. that politics. It was really just about they were annoyed about being pushed around with the vaccines. Which again, I was completely with them. No one can challenge my credentials as being totally anti-COVIDian from the jump. I never fell for any of it. But anyway, it's still, and then we're finding out that some of those people just don't understand why those Palestinian people are such barbarians. And gosh, we sure need to fight Israel. Help Israel because they've never heard of this conflict before, or, Ukraine, did you see how terrible Putin is? And we need to support, blue and yellow flags in their windows now. Or they went the other direction and now they're like, listening to Alex Jones and talking about Bilderberg and going a little off the rails as the right wing is too. Or they became Trumpists. But so yeah, you see now, I've seen like the people who've been on my show, people who I've sort of allied myself with in recent years. I'm no longer with them. It's various issues. Since COVID, there have been a few issues, but those have been the big two that just peeled people away and it broke it apart. And I'm glad because I didn't like that coalition. I didn't want to be a part of that. I didn't like huge chunks of that, especially now that the Trump movement has shown itself to be what it is, which is disappointment to say the least to me. But
well, most of the COVID resistance is a day late and a dollar short. It was just like, it seems like a lot of people were riding a wave of popular taste at the time and trying to rebrand themselves. I think the people who first initially opposed COVID were so degenerate and so like, if all the news is telling you that it's dangerous to go outside and you have this entire moral panic like we have, and there's this unknown virus and people are dropping down dead, you have to be a degenerate, self-centered asshole, redneck, often, to say those people are idiots. I'm going to go out and party regardless.
I kept count. This is a real number. I was yelled at, and I mean yelled at. This is outdoors. I was yelled at outdoors on hiking trails or walking paths 20 times, like in the beginning, like the first year. Yeah, no, I was, fuck, I don't want to relive that shit. That was hard. Living around here, especially in the Bay Area where it was 99% compliance. They did studies and they showed they had like numbers for every city of compliance rates of mask wearing. And it was 99% for the entire Bay Area. Like it was everybody. The fucking dogs wore masks here. But anyway, don't want to even talk about it anymore. Glad that coalition's breaking apart. It's, yeah. I'm just thinking of multiple people in my head right now who I know very personally who were part of that coalition who I'm no longer speaking to, basically, for various reasons. So yeah. So, what's in the news?
Sweden joined NATO. I think that's the biggest.
Good move.
Story. Yeah. Good move for Sweden.
That'll make you safe. That'll stop war from happening. Long tradition of neutrality, sort of semi-neutrality, kind of fake neutrality. But, nonetheless, they weren't formally members and now they are. I don't know the internal politics of Sweden around this enough to comment on that, but it's based on the myth, the ongoing myth that Putin somehow has some interest in invading Sweden someday, or anywhere in Europe and someday, it's just the weirdest thing. He not only doesn't have the interest, there's not one shred of evidence of him saying or doing anything to suggest that he's interested in that. Number one. Number two, the Russian political economy, the industrial base, the military base is like, do you think it's capable now? After we've seen what's happened after 2 years of war in Ukraine? Yeah, they basically won the war, but holy Christ, it wasn't easy for them. Do you think they're capable of taking over a country like Sweden? What? And administering it as a colonial state? This is such a bizarre fantasy. What are they going to foment from outside? A revolution of pro-Putinists within Sweden? And then they'll have some Putinist revolution in Sweden? I mean, there's not anything like that in Sweden. There's nothing like that in Western Europe at all. There are no Putinist movements anywhere in the goddamn continent. Barely even in Russia itself, there are hardly any Putinist movements. But I mean, it's just the most ludicrous presumption as to why these countries need to be in NATO. Now, they believe it. Swedes, obviously, I mean, the majority of Swedes believe it. Not all of them, but a majority do, clearly. As did a majority of all the other freaking NATO countries that volunteered to join after 1991, which is a lot now. If you look at a map, it's basically almost all of Europe at this point. So, I mean, joining NATO is cheap. It provides for cheap defense. The U.S. basically foots the bill. And that's probably in part what they were banking on the long run. Every European country doesn't, as Trump famously kept saying and still says, they don't pay their fair share. They don't pay what they're obligated to pay as a share of their GDP. Or a share of their budget, I guess. Whatever, some share of their national economy.
What do you think of, real quick, you brought that up. What do you think of the anti-Trump critique from anti-establishment foreign policy people saying that Trump's main critique of NATO actually strengthens NATO? His main critique was, why aren't other members buying into it? And so his policy basically strengthened NATO. Yeah.
Smart. It's a very smart critique. Yeah, they're right. I mean, ultimately, it was nice to hear like any criticism of NATO. So a lot of us were like, wow, a president is saying shit about NATO. But they're right. Ultimately, it does, in the long run, strengthen NATO because it doesn't question the legitimacy of NATO. It doesn't question whether we should be a member of NATO, whether we should be leading NATO, and all the rest of it. Whether there should be an Article 5 making us obligated to go to war in the case of any of our NATO allies getting attacked. So now Sweden, by the way, we just added another country, huge country with a huge border, quite near Russia. If anything happens militarily between Sweden and any other country like Russia, we got to go to war now.
Hey, but if anything happens here, Sweden has our back.
I mean, they don't, unlike the Israelis, they don't let women in their army, so I'm not interested.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, in a Swedish invasion or occupation would be fine.
That sounds like some like 80s, 90s exploitation film, the invasion of the Swedish bikini models.
Bikini army?
Yeah.
Indeed. Yes, it is. The 70s were a great time. I actually remember them.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about, you put this in the document, the story about Germany potentially sending long-range missiles to Ukraine, and
yeah, it got worse. So that was the story a week ago when I put it in there. Now the story is, do you know what the story is now about what Germany's been up to with Ukraine?
Well, there's just the fact that was I want to bring it up because it was a leaked conversation that Russian media brought out, and then Germany's now saying this is part of a disinformation campaign on the part of Russia.
Oh yeah, sure.
But yeah,
but they can't deny it. I mean, it's video.
Yeah,
and is it two generals? Is that what it is? British or German generals? It's German defense ministers, I think.
Yes,
one of the same thing. It's the Defense Department. It's high officials in the German Defense Department, whatever it's called. Mm-hmm. Talking about with the Ukrainian, with Zelensky's aide, somebody in the Zelensky office, about plans to attack the Kerch Bridge, which connects Crimea, with Taurus missiles, which is their big German missiles. Like, so that's an attack on Russia. They were planning. That's a Russian bridge. Crimea is Russian now. I mean, whatever you think of the legitimacy of any of that, it certainly everyone would interpret it as an attack on Russia, which it is. Then NATO's at war with Russia. So that's what these cats were just planning. Mm-hmm. Germany, it's not crazy either, because Germany has been possibly the most fanatical of all the NATO countries in supporting Ukraine, even more than the UK. Germany's been nuts, given all their tanks to them. I mean, just, oh my God. Yeah, definitely they've been the most fanatical. And in fact, the left-wing Germans have been the most fanatical. The Green Party in Germany is kind of the most pro-Zelensky, pro-Ukraine political group in the world, arguably. So it's not at all surprising that the German military would get up to something like that. Let's talk about Trotskyism. Let's talk about my parents' 1960s revolutionary socialist Trotskyist group, the International Socialists, because once again, Michael Weimer, its lineage, basically my political family members are in the news on opposite sides. It's wild. So both George Galloway and Victoria Nuland are descended from that group.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. And I looked it up. I confirmed it with Galloway. I was like, yeah, sure. I thought he was before, but yeah, he was. Or he is. So Trotskyist, 1960s, the International Socialist. That was, it went through sort of many names and iterations, but that was the name when I was a kid, when my parents were in it. In California, it was an international group. The headquarters was in London. It was a sort of British originally, but then had a big US base to it. Big, and by big, I mean like, I think there were maybe 5,000 to 10,000 people in this group at some point at its height. But anyway, Galloway was in it in the UK back in the 60s. And then the neoconservatives came out of that. Not all of them, but several of them, like Irving Kristol, came out of it, and sort of they established the culture and ideology of neoconservatism. So what happened in the 60s, to tell the story again, is that the little dinky Trotskyist movement ended up becoming hugely influential because it split into two. The left wing, which is my parents and George Galloway, remained anti-war and anti-US empire all the time, 100%. And also, by the way, anti-Zionist. This, I come by it naturally. The IS was pretty much I think I said this before, was the very first left-wing organization to be anti-Zionist in the world. And that's but anyway, so Galloway, my parents were part of that left movement of Trotskyism. And they ended up in various organizations that you see on college campuses today, like, what's it called? I forget. The DSA. There's some DSA. There's some people who ended up in DSA, but no, there's an actual direct lineage that's big on college campuses. I'm forgetting the name. Anyway, and then then there was a split. So that was the left wing. The right wing of Trotskyism became neocons, became anti-communist in a militant way, supported the Cold War, supported the US empire, supported American militarism across the world, and joined with this guy, Scoop Jackson, Henry Jackson, the senator from Washington State, very important, powerful senator, who was known as the senator from Boeing, who was a super liberal Democrat on every social and cultural issue. He was like on the left, except on war and the military and the empire. He was all in for every war and from the military budget and for military bases across the world. So all the right-wing Trotskyists, who then became anti-communist, anti-Soviet, pro-US, started working for Scoop Jackson, including Bill Kristol and a bunch of people, Paul Wolfowitz. And Victoria Nuland married a Kagan. The Kagans were in that crowd that came out of that sort of Trotskyist movement. And Victoria Nuland's married to Robert Kagan. Yeah, so I said the Kagan family is sort of the most important family. And now, again, I don't know if the Kagans themselves were ever Trotskyist, but as I said, they came out of that little milieu in the 60s and 70s. Exact same milieu as my parents. Irving Kristol was a member of the IS also. Yeah, like so it's just weird. I mean, this little radical organization split into two, and the left wing became the leaders of the anti-war movement, and the right wing became leaders of the neoconservative movement that took over the US government and foreign policy. I mean, and basically the world. I mean, Victoria Nuland has run Eastern Europe for the last decade. Something else. So anyway, Galloway, who's just, he's a garrulous old, quite, I don't know, he's funny to watch. People hate his ass. I mean, they just despise Galloway, or they love him. He's this old Marxist who's been in the parliament off and on for 2 decades, I think. Always a straight up socialist Marxist. He was in the Labor Party for a very long time. And then he left the Labor Party and he formed a new party. I think it's called the Workers' Party, which is just, again, straight up Marxist socialist. But he's always been, as I said, fierce anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, and is, of course, called an anti-Semite for that. And there's a whole thing about that in the UK about Galloway being an anti-Semite when he's really just an anti-Zionist. But he was just reelected after he's been out of parliament for like 6 or 7 years, I think, and he just got reelected. And so he's going to be giving speeches on the floor of the parliament. And everybody on the Palestine solidarity side is extremely excited about this because he's going to have a huge platform to give. Like, he gives stem winder speeches, and he said this was for Gaza when he won. That was his speech. He said, this is for Gaza. That's how passionate this guy is. And he's been doing this thing, and he's been political, as I said, since the 1960s or 70s. So people just watch out for that. I mean, again, you won't like all of his politics. I don't, and I don't like all of him either, but who cares? He's great on this stuff, and he's really good at giving a speech about it. So that's good. And then Vicki Nuland, actually, she's called Toria, turns out. That's her nickname. Very not a warm and fuzzy nickname. Not surprising. She's resigned from the State Department. She has served in every administration except for Donald Trump since the Bushes. Pretty impressive. Since the Clintons, I think. Yeah, no, she was in the Clinton administration. Not Clinton, not Bush 1, I don't think, but she was in Clinton, and then all the subsequent ones except for Bush. I mean, except for Trump. She's leaving. Now, what's happened? There's a lot of speculation as to why now. But I mean, I think number one, I'm sure she sees the writing on the wall that Trump will be elected in November, at which point her head will be put on a pike. If she's in the state, or even trying to be around the State Department, there is, I think, more pressingly, there's right now an investigation by the Justice Department. Interestingly, I think it's the FBI. It could be a special division of the Justice Department. Looking into the spending of, I think it's $10.5 billion just in 2014 on Project Ukraine that Victoria Nuland oversaw, and for which apparently there's zero record of where it went. So that's going on right now, and there's a lot of speculation that's why she left. Mm-hmm. It could also signal some sort of change in policy, and that's also quite likely, because as I've said for the last few weeks, there have been a lot of signals coming out of Washington, Brussels, the media, showing a change in policy on Ukraine. And as I said last week about that amazing revelation, quote revelation, really a leak in the New York Times about the CIA bases in Ukraine for the last 10 years, saying, I suggested that might have signaled that they're ready to leave Ukraine, to get rid of it, to get rid of this project, to sort of wash their hands of it. This could be another move in that direction, because they've known it's over since last summer. And there's been a fight. We know they've been fighting internally. Mark Milley and I think Lloyd Austin, but especially Mark Milley, were passionate about stopping, or at least pausing or slowing down Ukraine. And of course, Nuland and most of the State Department are lunatic neocons or neoliberals who are just passionate about Putin and need to kill him. So they won't stop ever. And I think there was basically a war going on between those factions for the last 6 to 8 months. And I think one faction just won. I think Blinken was forced to concede to the relatively dovish non-neocon faction. It always comes out of the Pentagon, by the way. The Pentagon always saves us. It's incredible, or not incredible. I mean, it's the military brass nowadays is all politicized, but still, they still ultimately have to answer to the men in uniform who actually go to war. And those guys are always much more reluctant to go to war than the civilian politicians are. And so it's not surprising to me that even though Milley is a scumbag, as I said, fake, basically brass politician, again, he's still in the Pentagon. It's not surprising to me that he's the one who pulled the brakes, was the first one to pull the brakes on Ukraine. and not the intellectual Victoria Nuland with her academic credentials and her academic husband and her academic family, where the ideas for every war in this country's history have come from those people, from academics, from professors. Look it up. Every single one was thought up. Intervention by the United States and some other part of the world has always been thought up by a PhD. Every single time, not by some military guy, ever. It's always by somebody at Harvard or Columbia, maybe Yale or Princeton. That's it. So yeah, this is important times. There's a crossroads here. Will the empire give up? Will it even slow down? I don't see it. Although getting rid of Victoria Nuland might be evidence that it is attempting to slow down, but we'll see. The guy who replaced her, his name is Bass. His last job was overseeing the withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Well, that's the thing, is like these people always fail up. So do you think we're going to see Victoria Nuland in office again, or do you think she's going to get a cushy academia job like Hillary Clinton, or what?
I mean, I assume think tank.
Mm-hmm.
Or she could attach herself as the foreign policy advisor to the next Democratic winner or Republican winner.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know if the establishment, if the foreign policy blob, whoever the next foreign policy blob winning candidate is, she could try to attach herself to him or her. Mm-hmm. You know, as the next state. She wants to be Blinken. She wants to be Secretary of State, of course. Mm-hmm. But she would settle for a think tank job that's really influential in the meantime. Some of the think tanks have like a pipeline directly to the State Department. Mm-hmm. CFR has had one since 1939. I know this because I researched it. They literally sort of set up shop inside the State Department. That's Council on Foreign Relations would send their guys down, and they would sit there all week hammering out plans for the war. And they've done that since then. And there's several think tanks that have that access to the State Department, which means that they basically established foreign policy. This is where the ideas, as I said, for foreign policy come from, is from those think tanks. It's the State Department itself probably doesn't produce much of it. So she's going to be still extremely influential, making up wars for us to fight in, to defeat imaginary enemies, to advance the empire, to realize this dream of a worldwide global Pax Americana, which the neocons, they've had that dream since I was born, literally. And they're not giving it up, and they're willing to kill fields and fields and fields worth of people to get it. So we'll see. Good luck, Victoria.
And as for George Galloway, I think he was kicked out of Parliament, 3-ish, or it was around the Iraq War. And it's funny, all the hit pieces bring up him as if he's like his whole career, he's an Assad apologist, he's a Saddam Hussein apologist. Like, that's all he is.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same stuff they say about the gray zone, same politics. And, I've followed the gray zone extremely closely for about 2 years now. I have followed the Duran extremely closely for 2 years now. I still haven't seen one instance, and especially not in the gray zone, I haven't seen one instance of them caring even enough to front for Putin or Assad or any. They don't care. Why would they care about supporting Assad? It's not like there's nothing about Assad that's attractive to some lefty guy in the United States, Galloway, I believe, I don't know him as well, but I believe it's the same way. It's a nonsense. It's McCarthyism. They are simply opponents of their opponents, which is the U.S. empire. They have the same politics, as far as I can tell, that I do. I've not seen these guys ever support Assad or support Hamas even, or support any of that stuff, any of these foreign dictators, allegedly. In the 60s during Vietnam, there were people who supported openly, vocally the Viet Cong. They took the side of Ho Chi Minh. They were pro-communist in Vietnam. And the left was a real problem. In the Iraq War in 2003, there were people in the Answer Coalition who kind of ran the left-wing anti-war movement, unfortunately. And they were this really weird sectarian left-wing group. And there was a bunch of them who were openly pro-Saddam Hussein. I mentioned this before, I think. I went to college with a girl who was a fan of Muammar Gaddafi. But that's rare. Is what I'm saying. Those are the only instances that I've ever seen. And I've been around the left my whole life, and it's those few people. But overwhelmingly, no, we're just opposed to the U.S. war. That's all. We're not for necessarily the movement they're trying to suppress.
Gaddafi fans are more numerous than you might think, especially internationally.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I guess it's more just because he was murdered so brutally, and he gave some great speeches, and the idea of a united Africa against the Western order is something that hangs in the imagination of a lot of people. So Gaddafi holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts now.
Yeah, the Little Green Book. Yeah, that's what Star Lester had in her dorm room at Antioch College. I remember that. I was thinking, wow, I'm in an interesting place right now.
But George Galloway was expelled from the Labour Party in 2004 for saying that British troops fighting with the U.S. Audio just. I'm on your side now.
How's that?
Check. We're good.
Is that good? Okay.
Yeah. He said that British troops fighting alongside the U.S. in Iraq should disobey orders because the war is an illegal war.
Oof.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love that? I mean, if you don't love that, then we can't be friends. That's my politics right there. Like, that's it. Sounds good to me. If he ever says anything positive about Putin himself or Maduro, let me know. I mean, maybe he has, or Assad, and I will not be cool with that, but the gist of it is not that. I mean, I know the general gist of these guys is not about that. It's not about praising these foreign dictators and wanting to bring their form of politics to America. I don't see that. But I do see just a hostility to American empire and a real sympathy with the countries it has affected. We don't see it because we're not on the knife's edge. We don't ever experience the bombs, the occupation, the tanks, the troops on the ground, or all their proxies doing all their war making. We don't experience that here. We're so insulated. Even in World War II, I mean, where's Hawaii exactly? I mean, pretty damn far away. I mean, Americans as a body haven't felt it since the Civil War. It just hasn't, which means none of us have that feeling at all. It's just, and it makes it so easy to just sit back and watch this shit on our TVs and let it roll on and on. But what I'm telling you, everybody, is it's coming to a head in two places: the Middle East and Europe. The Victoria Nulands, unless this is some purge of the neocons, and they're done, which I doubt, we are going to continue. We're heading to a big conflict, even bigger than Ukraine. Even though Russia has essentially won the war in Ukraine, Sweden joining NATO, continuing to expand, the member states of NATO being just as aggressive and belligerent as ever before, the State Department and the think tanks being just as aggressive and belligerent against Russia as ever before. I mean, they're still not giving up on Ukraine. They're still sending weapons into Ukraine while they're still probably planning a withdrawal, a surrender, and some kind of negotiated settlement, but they're still sending massive amounts. We just sent them how much? 60 billion? Jesus Christ. So, and Russia has just won a major battle. And they're also gearing up. Their military industrial base is just churning out artillery and tanks every day. And the army's bigger than ever. And Putin's more popular than ever. And they're ready to kick more ass if you would like to fuck with them again. So, Victoria Nuland on her way out gave a couple of interviews. She said a couple of things. She said, number one, We have tightened the noose around Putin. This is a country we're not at war with. We're not even officially like hostile with them. That's what we're up to. We're trying to kill the head of Russia, the president of Russia. That's what we're up to. The noose. We're tightening a noose around Putin. That's what our country's doing. That's what you're okay. Good to know. Good to announce that to Putin. Gee, I wonder why he's so paranoid. Why, you hear this all the time. Putin's so paranoid. He thinks that they're trying to get him. They think that Putin thinks that NATO is an offensive organization. He's so crazy, that Putin. She said a noose. Then she said Ukraine is about to enter into a new phase. And I talked about this a few weeks ago. They've been planning this for a while. This was sort of the first announcement of it. She called it it's entering a new phase of what she called asymmetric warfare, which means guerrilla warfare and terrorist warfare, which has already happened. I mean, how many attacks have already happened, even in St. Petersburg? I think there's been a few, Moscow, several drones, some missiles in what's the border town, Belgorod, that's gotten hit many, many times. Many people in Belgorod have been killed, civilians.
Well, this has been like the official policy for months, right?
For like a year since the offensive failed. Basically, they've been trying. Remember that drone hit Moscow, Red Square? Yeah, that was like somewhere around since the offensive failed. They've been resorting to that stuff. Assassinations. Daria Dugina, that guy in St. Petersburg when they blew up the cafe to kill him. He was a Wagner like spokesperson, basically. So anyway, that's the new phase we're entering into. It'll be fun, a lot of fun, a lot of terrorist killing of random civilians in both countries, most likely. Crimea, I'd hate to live in Crimea because they've already been attacking Crimea. They're gonna figure out there's gonna be like all sorts of terrorist attacks in Crimea. It's gonna be horrible. Donbass, they're gonna figure out a way to get back at Donbass, I'm sure. So they're just gonna launch terrorist and guerrilla attacks inside Donbass and Crimea to try to harass the Russians to give up and leave. That's what and she's going to oversee that most likely. And she's going to be the one sort of directing aid to that movement from the US government. She's the one who's going to figure out how to support that movement. Will it be the CIA? Will it be the Defense Department? Will it be, special operations, whatever? She's the one who's going to coordinate arming, training, equipping, giving intelligence to, giving advice to, giving instructions to commando units, and drone operators to do like really nasty stuff, like attack civilians, which they've already done. She's a lovely person. It's just amazing. Yeah. Amazing. So and they wonder why Putin went to war against these people. Tightening a noose around. We're not at war with them, honey. Like, what are you talking about? Wow. Thanks for spilling the beans, though. Now we know it. You confirmed what we've always known.
Yeah, well,
maniacs.
The big, this should be seen as a failure that U.S.-Russia relations are worse than they were during the Cold War, worse than they were when Stalin was in charge. It's unfathomable that probably Russia's most liberal leader ever in Putin has gotten has been so demonized. He's probably the only guy in Russia's history that we could honestly work with that has been at that level of power. And we've thrown it all away.
He wanted capitalist reform and development, and he wanted to join NATO, and he wanted to trade with the West. Those are the things that he wanted. You can leave out the NATO part. He wanted to trade with the West, and he wanted capitalism, and he got that. And that's it. That's it. There's just the whole thing is an invention that he's some kind of problem for us, that he's some kind of threat that we need to worry about. The whole thing is an invention. Oh, and he's murdered all these journalists and poisoned people. That's all been debunked. All of it. It's just incredible. And like all of the political opposition that he put in jail, he did. He sure did. He shut down media. Oh, hell yeah, he did. He shut down newspapers and radio stations and TV stations. Oh, a lot of them. A whole lot of them. Guess what? Every fucking one of them was working with the CIA. Like, with the United States government. That's who we shut down. Would the US not do the same thing with Russian affiliated organizations that are trying to overthrow the government? That's the point. These were organizations, media outlets trying to overthrow the government of Russia, being supported and aided and directed by a foreign entity, by a foreign country that was trying to overthrow the government of Russia. That's who Putin shut down. And that's what I know. I don't care. I'm sure he's been an authoritarian in other ways and all sorts of ways that I, of course, would oppose night and day if I were Russian. But that's why he did those things, not because he's some like monstrous genocidal lunatic. He's a rational actor, everybody. But look it up. Go look up Navalny. Go look up every TV. Go look up. There's a list of all the TV and radio stations and newspapers in Russia that have been censored and shut down by Putin. And then go research it. Go look. You'll find there's some American organization that worked with every single one of them. Every single one of them. It's just, that's what he did. But they use all of that to sort of claim that he's Hitler. And he's out to, he's going to conquer the world, or at least, or Europe. It's just like, but we are teetering on the brink of World War III because of this lie, this ongoing lie. And people will just, I have, half my friends would hear this and just like roll their eyes and think, I don't know, that I hang out with Scott Horton too much or something. I don't know. Or that I've like gone over the edge or. No, I've done the research, guys. Like, and I've just done the research. Just look at it. It's not even that hard to do. It's really not. Go look up the Skripals. That's the most famous case of Putin poisoning his opponents in England. Go look that up. Clearly MI6 made up bullshit. Every one of them is fishy as hell and has major holes in it and is almost always British intelligence behind it. So anyway, thank you, Vicki Nuland. Go find a fucking new career occupation before you kill us all.
So in line with potentially, singling out people as adversaries that shouldn't necessarily be adversaries, have you looked at the TikTok bill?
No.
Yeah, the House committee just today advanced the bill that could lead to a nationwide ban against TikTok. It gives TikTok 165 days, or ByteDance, to sell TikTok, so it's not owned by the Chinese Communist Party. And if it doesn't sell it, then it's banned on Apple stores and all the app stores.
Everyone should please watch my interview with Jake Werner on Unregistered about 6 months ago, maybe. Jake Werner from the Quincy Institute, expert on China, U.S.-China relations, brilliant guy, University of Chicago, PhD. It's essential to watch that because he will calm you right down. There's a lot of hysteria about China. And I was really glad I talked to him because he really calmed me down. I had been kind of ginned up a bit myself from listening to right-wingers yell about China for years. The TikTok thing is just such hysteria. What exactly is the fantasy about what the CCP is going to do with TikTok to our children? What's the fantasy?
Well, we live in an information age. Data is the most important resource we have. So observing what makes our kids tick could inform them into some sort of psychological operation they could launch in the future, some misinformation campaign. If they have that information on what we do, that's the big one. And then
to get what? Like to achieve what?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you have to imagine China as a bad entity. You have to imagine them as a bad actor, and then or you have to like project all the evil things on. But
we just need to tell the right wing there's no drag queens in China. Okay, just stop, just chill out. These people are not a threat to you. There's no drag queens there, so you don't have to worry about them.
The conspiracy theory I've heard before, one of them is that like China is an economic competitor, and China's version of TikTok shows you patriotism, and it shows you science, and it shows you exercise. And the version that they give America shows you degeneracy and shows you filth and shows you just bright casino lights to keep you scrolling and occupied. So China will take us over because they're training their kids better.
Oh yeah, no, that's why our kids are fat for sure. It's the Chinese. It's the bureaucrats working in Beijing offices in the Communist Party headquarters. They're the ones who have figured out how to manipulate your children and make them eat the hamburger a third time. Like, are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. It's just right-wing fever dreams, man. It's really silly shit. But if you just need to know anything about the behavior of the CCP, they don't care, and you can't even imagine what purpose that would serve for them. Like, what would they be up to that would serve their interest? Again, what has the CCP wanted to do historically over the last 30 to 40 years? Just like Putin, what have they wanted to do? They've wanted to trade with the United States, and they did. We became their number one trading partner, bought all their shit. And it was great for them. So they need us, dumbasses. The Chinese need us, or they certainly at least want us as partners, as trading partners. They want to have good relations with us. Jesus, this is like basic libertarian wisdom that is very, very important. Countries that choose to trade should be embraced and traded with, because when you trade with them, there's almost guaranteed that there will be no war between you because you need each other. I mean, unless you have ideological freaks in your governments like Franklin Roosevelt with Japan, who cut off the trade to go to war with them, or the neocons now who cut off trade with Russia and then everybody they're opposed to go to war with them. But generally speaking, the peoples and the governments in general will like get along and not go to war if there is robust trade between them. And in the case of China and Russia are two major rivals. Those two countries have wanted to trade badly, just as Japan did in the 1930s. Roosevelt didn't let them. He didn't let them. He stopped the trade and went to war with them instead, forced them to go to war. So yeah, that's the choice again. The legacy of sanctions, which Franklin really pioneered with the Japanese, which is really the proximate cause of the Pacific War and World War II. Not at all necessary, never necessary, completely ideological. It was Franklin Roosevelt's own ideas that led to that. We don't need it again, but that's what we're doing. Sanctioning the whole fucking world in order to go to war with them. So, yeah, let's not go there.
Mm-hmm. Chris Hayes posted that he believes TikTok is massively shaping public opinion and discourse. I'm pretty sure in a right-wing direction. And 2, it is the apex predator of the social media ecosystem. It's what slot machines are to casino gambling.
Whoa, wait. Chris Hayes thinks it's right-wing?
Yeah. I have a theory on that.
Because of the dancing? Well, why? I don't get it.
I think it's just a knee-jerk reaction for Democrats who are the foreign policy establishment to demonize TikTok for some reason. Well, this is a theory. Brianna Joy Gray was saying that it's the Democratic foreign policy establishment is opposing TikTok because Palestinians are documenting their lives on TikTok, and it's going viral, and the Palestinian resistance is getting viral on TikTok.
Libs of TikTok. My friend Haya Ratchik made a career off of TikTok. That's right.
Libs of TikTok pushing people in but I think it's definitely anti-woke in a lot of ways. I think it's just very hedonistic, and that goes against the liberal consensus and the puritanical liberal norms.
That's a killer point. I
Yeah.
had never thought of that, dude. Yes. The hedonism is what you always want to side with, because hedonism will always subvert and dissolve any form of authoritarianism. It'll just get washed away by people's desire for fun and pleasure. So the wokeness authoritarianism, right-wing Christian controlling authoritarianism, that's been swept away by people's desire for stuff, right? All of them. Islam, Sharia law is always fighting against this stuff. That's why there's fatwas issued every day against pop culture and all the good stuff in it. Yeah, so TikTok, if that's true, makes sense, because that's how I see TikTok. I see it as a bunch of girls dancing, basically. I mean, seems like every other video is that. Yeah, that's not communist. That's not fascist. That's not liberal. That's not nothing. That's just fun, which is pure individualist, egoist human expression, which no political ideology or government can ever encompass, contain, or extinguish. There it is. I love it, man. TikTok is the beacon of freedom. Hell yeah. And notice. Oh, sorry.
I guess you brought up libs of TikTok. I guess another right-wing push on TikTok would be Andrew Tate, how he pretty much took over that platform for like a month, and then
did you see libs of TikTok Haya Ratch, I think how she pronounces it, Ratchik, her interview with Taylor Lorenz? Did you see that?
I saw her ambush her on the street, and I couldn't really.
No, it wasn't an ambush. No, it was a legit sit down. They arranged it.
Sit down.
It was a 1 hour interview, one-on-one.
Then why were the aesthetics so awful then? Like, why was it horribly filmed?
It was at a cafe in LA on the street. I don't know. Yeah, Dumb and Dumber. That's all I gotta say. So not just that. If you, I was just watching them and just noticing that, like, they are both sort of like the caricature of the politics I don't like. I mean, if you like either one of these girls, which they both are, yeah, we're not going to get along. I mean, they're just from the left and the right. They're the worst to me of the left and the worst of the right. Right there, those two represent all of it. You can just watch that interview, and that's the opposite of who I am. I just wanted to put that out there. Really horrendous politics and people. Both of those are.
I think they're all.
Oh, I mean, if you think about it, they both obviously built their careers on public shaming. That's all that's what they do. That's how they built their careers. It's just, they're the worst people. I mean, who does that? And again, they're on the left and the right. So I'm really not, this is not for me about their politics or even about my personal thing with Ratchik. No, I mean, Lorenz never did anything to me, but she's grotesque. She's just as bad and has done the same thing. It just, but they're so popular on the left and the right. And so many people on my side, on our side, love libs of TikTok. And I really need them to get over that. Again, Jack is the only one I've seen criticizing libs of TikTok on our side, which is great. Need more of that. She's a vile presence.
I was going to ask about culture. I think the 2020s are a post-woke era. I think a lot of people are talking about this in relationship to Saturday Night Live having Shane Gillis host 5 years after he was fired, and then following it up with Sydney Sweeney, a sex symbol who has fun with it.
Overrated.
I
don't get it. She's overrated. I mean, she's cute. Boobs are fine, but I don't get it. I mean, we had much better sex symbols. I'm just saying. Gen X, you guys are really falling down on the job. Anyway, sorry. Yes, post wokeness.
Yeah, we're in a post woke era. A lot of movies.
Sydney Sweeney shaking her titties on stage is evidence that we're in a post woke era.
Yeah, Richard Hanania posted a picture of her and said wokeness is dead.
I saw that.
I think it's more just like a general observation of, I mean, they used to call it a vibe shift, but just the change in aesthetics and the change in attitudes. There's a lot of movies in Hollywood like Tar, and then I think Anatomy of a Fall is the same way. And a lot of movies that are skeptical of the media, skeptical of moral panic and outrage. What's that movie? Zone of... Well, no, I don't want to talk about that. But yeah, do you notice this shift that we're in a post-woke age, that wokeism is unpopular broadly? Mike Majelik, or whatever that guy's name, who hangs out with Logan Paul, he was getting in an argument with some people saying, dude, if I wanted to make money, I'd go anti-woke. This liberal thing is like the minority now. All the biggest influencers, Patrick Bet-David, Andrew Tate, Sneeko,
Right.
like everybody is anti-woke now. That's the new establishment.
Which is why it's so boring too, by the way. Like anti-woke is more boring than woke is now. In my view. It's like how many anti-woke podcasters are there? Good Lord. Like you gotta do something else, guys. Branch out a bit. We know the blue-haired ladies are crazy. I got it. Yeah, I agree with you. Can we talk about something else now? Yeah, I mean, when was the last time you saw a BLM poster or sign or t-shirts or hat? Hardly. A year ago? 2 years ago? Plastered. Every city, all over the place. Every website, every TV channel, everything had BLM on it. You don't see it at all now. You don't hear about it. I guess the police have stopped hunting black men. And I guess college freshman boys have stopped raping college women. I guess that all stopped because we don't hear about it anymore. It's weird. We also barely hear about climate change. It's funny when there's like some big other news story like Gaza, climate change appears to like stop, which is cool. Like we should just have bigger, like worse wars, and then we can stop the destruction of the planet. Maybe that's actually the plan. But yeah, I mean, I do see a lot of evidence of it. The decline. You just in Hollywood and in the sort of cultural production, TVs, movies, music. Even there's just less of it. You see the ads are still like they're still doing lots of diversity representation, but you see less sort of overt hammer you with political messages. The Super Bowl, same thing. Yeah, I think the NFL had like end racism or something and written in the end zones, but halftime show was apolitical. Usher was totally apolitical. I don't remember anything else. I don't think the players were wearing much that was political. It's great. Yeah. And the gender pronouns, I mean, I'm waiting for that to decline. I am still around people in my personal life who use they, them, and it's really something. And I'm counting the days until it fades away because I can't do that ever. But no, it's fading. And we'll see. We'll see if it dies or if it just relapses. Because there was this in the early 90s. People might forget political correctness, it was called then. It wasn't quite as bad or as ferocious, but it was big, and it was a big thing in the 90s. Then it quieted down for a while because liberals wanted to let Bill Clinton get his penis sucked by Monica Lewinsky in private, in peace. And so they stopped talking about date rape.
And the victim blamed Lewinsky at the time too.
Look it up. Yeah. Go look it up. The date rape hysteria was right before the Lewinsky thing, and it stopped. Boom. They stopped talking about it. And then it came back with a vengeance, as we all know, with Me Too. And then, before that, the campus sexual assault hysteria of 2013 is when it really started. That was really the beginning of like the crazy woke period was 2013 with that stuff on the campuses with all the rape craziness, and I was in the middle of it then at Occidental, and then it was followed 2 years later by the race craziness on campuses. Again, people forget this. Like every campus in the country was occupied, and for about 2 years, every campus was occupied by black students saying that the Klan was torturing them on campuses. I mean, complete hysteria. Yeah, and and then of course 2020 and Me Too, and we're not in that anymore. This is definitely, there's been a crest and an ebb, I think, and we're in the ebb period. I think the intensity of Gaza has helped sort of distract people and sort of also remind people of what's important in politics, I hope. I mean, honestly, I think it's pretty hard to get out there and talk about your Me Too story about your boss who harassed you 10 years ago when the news is full of children missing arms and legs. I really do. I think it's sort of stopping people from their craziness, their narcissistic craziness now. So we'll see. But
Mhm.
yeah, thank God. Can't wait. Hope it dies, you know, so we can stop talking about it too, for God's sake.
No, and it's like when the Beatles like came over, and like you can't like they used to be called countercultural, and then they became the culture. I see like a tidal wave of that with Shane Gillis especially, but also anti-woke seems very antiquated now. It seems right. That whole
They just
movement.
seem so boring. Like
Yeah.
there's so many podcasts and podcasters who made their bones as anti-woke starting like 5-6 years ago when we started at the same time. And, you know, I've been on their shows, some of their shows, and some of them have been on my shows. And like the whole intellectual dark web, that whole thing, Jordan Peterson's whole thing is all about this, right? Joe Rogan's rise is very much about the anti-wokeness movement. And the first time I came on Joe Rogan was because of that. He heard that I was an anti-woke professor. So that's why he brought me on. The whole thing is about this anti-wokeness thing. It's this reaction against what we're calling wokeness. And God, it was the backbone of the whole podcasting movement, still is, you know. But now the shit's tired. We know. Like, I know. We know it. We all agree that it's intellectually bankrupt, that it's politically authoritarian, that it's terrible and worthless and needs to go. We all agree on that. But we obviously disagree on everything else, because Barry Weiss, who was another major part of that, now she's over there talking about how we need to censor people on college campuses who are anti-Israel. Miss free speech. Free press is what she calls her website. She started her fucking career at Columbia as an undergraduate trying to get some Palestinian professors fired because she felt unsafe because they were anti-Zionists. Sam Harris, same thing. Jordan Peterson half the time sounds like an absolute idiot. I'm sorry. I mean, he's really like, he makes a couple good points. I'm no longer feeling charitable just because he's so stupid these days. And he also ventures into so many issues that he knows zero about. And it's very annoying. When Ukraine started, he invited Robert Kagan's brother to explain it on his show to his audience. Well, I found an expert. Oh, he's let's see, Mr. Kagan here. So tell us about the Ukraine war. Like, he didn't know. He didn't know that he was bringing on like a chief ideologue. Fred Kagan, not Robert. Fred Kagan, Robert's brother. Victoria's brother-in-law. That's who Jordan Peterson brought on to explain the Ukraine war. You know, I mean, something that's important, that's that important. You're that irresponsible that you're going to think, and arrogant that you think you're the one who should like explain to your audience what it's about. No, you find out who the actual smart people are on this topic and you send your audience there. Good Lord. But yeah, so the IDW, the whole thing is just falling apart. They're all worthless. I always knew they were worthless. Gad's sad. I mean, he's one of the dumbest people in public life. You know, I just have to say Joe Rogan has stayed. He's the one who stayed consistent and true and principled and good and useful. And I actually have basically nothing but good things to say about Joe Rogan. But in general, the whole coalition against wokeness has broken apart, largely because it's intellectually exhausted. We just have nothing more to talk about. And then the coalition, which is connected to that, the COVID coalition, is also broken apart. Turns out we don't actually have much to agree on other than those two issues. We hate the blue-haired weirdos on college campuses, and we don't like lockdowns and masks. But other than that, we have nothing to agree on. Sorry to say. Do we have another? I feel like, was there another third news story?
Well, you want to talk about Israel's elections?
Maybe? Oh. I mean, well, no. I mean, the news is actually today. I believe they just had another ceasefire round of talks. So they're meeting Hamas, Israel, Qatar, the U.S., and maybe not the UK. and Egypt are meeting in Cairo, have been meeting in Cairo for ceasefire talks, and the latest one just broke down. And who knows exactly what happened, but I mean, Netanyahu has said we won't accept anything other than a complete surrender by Hamas. So it's not going to happen. It's just devastating.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask about Nikki Haley dropping out, and apparently she won Washington D.C. and Vermont. So it's like, how does somebody win Washington D.C. and Vermont, like, and not get the nomination? Like,
well, you know how many Republicans live in Washington D.C.? Like 10, 12. I mean, Nikki Haley's servants, I think, and I don't know, maybe her mom, the ones who still live in D.C. Yeah, Vermont. There's not a lot of Republicans there either.
Open primary, Democrats can vote in it, which I think is most of her support.
Vermont's lovely though. God, it's like a hippie paradise. Very green and beautiful, and full of like crunchy old hippies and a lot of snow. And Bernie Sanders and left-wing politics and guns. It's an interesting combination. So yeah, Nikki, of course she won that one. I don't know. Who cares? Fuck her. I mean, she's horrible. Yeah. She's a vicious, nasty imperialist. I'm good.
But Trump is officially the nominee now, barring some. I mean, he's the last one in the race, barring some physical or legal unexpected.
Here's what I don't understand. It's now March. What happened to Gavin Newsom? Where'd he go? He was getting ready to jump in, and I was sure he was going to jump in.
He said he wouldn't during the Ron DeSantis debate.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah.
Oh, he's no longer? He's now declared.
He was boosting his profile, but he never officially said he'd step in.
Oh, so there will be. Oh, there will be no challenge. This is it.
Yeah.
Biden's he's really going to go for it.
Barring some unforeseen emergency, that's what's going to happen.
I mean, you want to talk about arrogance. Talk about narcissism. I mean, I'd rather he set himself on fire, but this is amazing. An amazing demonstration of all that. He doesn't get embarrassed when he watches himself on TV. Does he not watch himself on TV? Does he not hear that everybody's talking about how he's decrepit? Everybody. Democrats are talking about it. And it's just wild to me. And the debates are going to be something else, boy. Did you see Trump's impersonation of him?
Most of them I've seen have been physical.
Yeah, he did a great physical one. He did a whole thing like walking off. He's trying to walk off the stage.
Yeah.
That one.
Like looking around. Yeah.
It was perfect. Yeah. I mean, he's going to dance on Joe Biden's poor little head when they get to that debate. Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. The first debate in 2020, I think Biden actually won from Trump having his ego so insulted by being put against Biden that Trump wouldn't shut up. And so he never gave Biden enough rope to hang himself. And I could see that happening again. I hope some advisor tips him in on that, but maybe we don't even have debates because they canceled the second one in 2020.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking they would do.
Yeah.
I think the Democrats will figure out a way to get him canceled. Too bad. It'd be highly entertaining. Wow, it's embarrassing. Geez, man. Third largest country in the world, largest empire in history, largest military, largest economy, richest country in history. And that's the president. And that's our choices to lead this thing with all those nuclear weapons and nuclear submarines, with Trident missiles that can destroy an entire continent in 5 minutes, roaming the earth 24/7. The commander-in-chief is the choice between those two guys. And Trump looks like the sober, rational, right, level-headed guy compared to. I mean, Biden's going to fall over and hit his head, and we're going to go to war because of it. Because Kamala's next, and she doesn't know like where Europe is. And then the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they're all like woke political people. That's what I've been hearing, by the way, about the top brass in the military. That they're like Lloyd Austin, all these guys. They're all just like career politicians, basically.
Yeah,
who haven't done anything in the military in decades. They're just Washington D.C. creatures. So, like, I mean, again, they're not. It's dangerous. The just the level of incompetence. I never thought I would worry about this, right? That the head of the empire, the superpower, would be incompetent, like in every way. And the danger would be that. It was always that they'd be ideological, they'd be too aggressive, right? That they would try to conquer some country that was unnecessary and start a war, you know, because of their ideology, because they were driven for some reason to do that. No, this is just because Biden doesn't know which way is up, nor does the vice president. I mean, he doesn't have a Dick Cheney. He doesn't have a strong, intelligent vice president who knows what's going on. She's like really doesn't have any idea about anything.
Yeah. It's deliberately fewer public appearances than him. Which is great. Yeah.
And about the major issues about foreign policy and the economy, I mean, she really doesn't know anything. She doesn't know a thing. There's not a thing she knows. That it's just Jesus, man. Like the meetings about this stuff, her description of the meeting about October 7th. Did you see that? When she's like giving, did we show that? Did we play that?
Yeah.
Amazing. Oh my God. Like, wow. And you know, she doesn't say a word. And just, it's really scary because that means the generals run foreign policy.
But wouldn't you rather have wouldn't you rather have a Biden than a Newsom? Somebody.
Oh yeah, I'd rather have a general. I'd actually rather have a general make the big calls than one of those freaks. Because as I said, they're more likely to go conservative because of the military. Anyway, all right, man, we got to go.
Yep.
This has been good. We're now going to go to the party, Unregistered Live after Unreported every Thursday night. We hang out on Zoom with patrons of Unregistered. And if you want to join us, go to this URL right there, which is about to go up on the screen. Patreon.com/unregistered. Join up at any level. Click the URL to go to the Zoom room. And you'll see us there. I'll be there in about 2 or 3 minutes, Michael, and I hope to see you there. This was fun, man. Thank you so much. And peace, everybody.
Yeah, peace.
All right.